Today in the Lightroom Whisperer, we're going to do something a little bit different than normal. I'm going to take you through the process from start to finish to create a macro stacked image. This is actually the same process that you would use for creating a landscape stack, and we're going to use Lightroom for our initial edits and then bring it into Photoshop to create that final image. We have a lot to do today, so let's get right to it. Photoshop Takeover. Before we get started though, did you know that in real life you and I could actually work together to improve your photography? Whether that be remotely from the comfort of your own living room, joining me around the world at any of the amazing destinations that I lead small group workshops, or even creating your own one-on-one like we're doing here. Lightsource Journeys, helping illuminate your photographic journey. For more information, check out the description below. Now let's get to it. The other day when I was watching TV, I noticed through the corner of my eye the way the light was coming through my window and hitting the orchid in my living room, and I was inspired. Now that I'm all framed up, I'm focused on the very beginning of my shot, which here is the buds in the kind of very bottom of where I'm shooting. There's also a bud in the very background, and that's what I'm going to finish my shot on. The problem is no matter how high my aperture, I couldn't get everything in focus. This is where focus stacking comes into play. Now, one thing that's really important is your camera doesn't move at all, so a tripod is necessary for this sort of thing. We need to be precise with this, so we want to switch to manual focus, and we also want to make sure to turn off the stabilizer, whether that's on the lens or in your camera's menu system. When you're on the tripod, the stabilizer is looking for little bits of motion. That little depression of that finger hitting the shutter is going to cause little bits of shake that activate that stabilizer, which will also throw off the sharpness of that shot. So I'm going to turn on my live view. I'm also going to turn on, in my drive mode, my 2-second timer. I don't have a cable release for this that I'm using, so I'm going to let that 2-second timer allow the camera to stop shaking after I hit the shutter to give me a nice sharp shot. Now that I've got my composition set up the way that I wanted, I'm going to go ahead and get my focus set on the very beginning of this area. For me right now, this is going to be these little buds leading into the orchids. After I move through the entire plant, there's actually a bud in the background that's going to be my final focus, and that's going to give us that depth that we're looking for this shot. It's better to have more photos than fewer photos to make sure you're capturing all that ground, especially in the macro range like this. Now that I'm all set up, I'm going to go ahead and start my shots. Now between each shot, I'm moving in minute little bits. I'm watching that bud in the foreground. I'm looking at the out of focus area just behind it, and I'm only moving enough to then capture the next area in focus. And I'm going to repeat this until I've moved through my entire frame. You want to make sure not to jiggle your tripod at all, because that can actually change the framing of your shot, and that little bit of changing will actually affect the final result we're looking for here. All right, now that I've got my shot, it's off to the computer. Let's go for it. We're going to start out like normal, and I'm just going to import my images from my SD card right into my computer through Lightroom. I'm just going to go to my keywords, and I'm going to type in focus, stacking, orchid, demo, and that should be okay. I'm going to go ahead and hit import. Okay, and there's our series of shots that we've got from our stacking. Now, if I actually pull up all of these pictures and I bring them into full screen, you're going to see there's a little bit of motion throughout this. Every time I refocus, it looks like it's zooming in or out a little bit. This is something known as focus breathing. There's something that we're going to use later on in Photoshop that's going to help align these pictures so we can get rid of any mismatches that would have happened. So to start with, what we're going to do is just edit the photo the way we would do with any other photo. This is the part that's really still shaping the way the image looks. We're just using Photoshop later on to merge these together. So I'm going to start with the first picture. I'm going to go in and I'm going to edit this the way that I think that I like it. So I'm going to go ahead and edit this the way that I think that I like it. So I'm going to go ahead and edit this the way that I think that I like it. So I'm going to go ahead and edit this the way that I think that I like it. So I'm going to go ahead and edit this the way that I think that I like it. So I'm going to go ahead and edit this the way that I think that I like it. So I'm going to go ahead and edit this the way that I think that I like it. So I'm going to go ahead and edit this the way that I think that I like it. So I'm going to go ahead and edit this the way that I think that I like it. So I'm going to go ahead and edit this the way that I think that I like it. So I'm going to go ahead and edit this the way that I think that I like it. So I'm going to go ahead and edit this the way that I think that I like it. So I'm going to go ahead and edit this the way that I think that I like it. So I'm going to go ahead and edit this the way that I think that I like it. So I'm going to go ahead and edit this the way that I think that I like it. So I'm going to go ahead and edit this the way that I think that I like it. So I'm going to go ahead and edit this the way that I think that I like it. So I'm going to go ahead and edit this the way that I think that I I'm starting to like the way this looks, but I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to tweak it a little bit, pulling down our saturation. And all right, I like that. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take the edits that we did on this first picture and I'm going to paste them to every other one that's in the sequence. So I'm going to start by just right-clicking on the picture now that we're back in grid view, and then I'm going to go to Develop Settings. Here I can say Copy Settings. Now once I go to Copy Settings, I can tell it what exactly I want to copy. In this case, it's really everything I've done to it, but if there were things we wanted to deselect, this is the case that we would do so. Now in this case, I want to copy everything, so I'm just going to hit Copy, and then I'm going to choose the pictures I want to apply this to. I'm just going to click on the first one, hold down Shift, select the last one, and it fills in all in between. Right click, and under that same Develop Settings, we now have Paste Settings. This is going to take that initial edit that I did and apply it to every one of those images, so we don't have to try to re-edit or paste it to each one of them individually. Now that all of the pictures have the edit that we want applied to them, we're going to go ahead and we can go to the drop-down menu, Photo, Edit In, and instead of just choosing Edit in Adobe Photoshop 2024, we're going to go down to Open as Layers in Photoshop. We could have done it just to open as, but it would have brought them all as separate images that we would just have to copy and paste onto the same picture as layers anyways. So by doing this, it's going to start them all as separate layers within the same image. Now these are all raw files, so this is going to take a moment to do, so let's sit back, maybe grab a coffee, and let it do its thing. Okay, now that Photoshop has all of our layers stacked in here, we're going to go to the side where our layers live. I've got our first one highlighted here. We're going to go to the last one, hold down Shift, and then poke it, which means all of them are now filled in between. Coming up to Edit, we're going to choose Auto Align Layers. This is going to make sure that when we do put these pictures and stack them on top of each other, everything lines up and that focus breathing doesn't affect that. Now that we have all these images aligned, we're going to go back into Edit. We're going to go down to Auto Blend Layers, which is the same place you would go to make a panorama. And we're going to go to Content Aware Fill Transparent Areas. This is going to take the new AI and the areas that it would normally have to crop out because of the way those alignments and the stacking happen. The edges really won't line up properly. There'll be some mishaps. This is going to use now AI to fill in those blank areas, and it's actually really good at it. So we're going to let it do its thing and hit OK. This is also going to take a while because it's now trying to find all those points within each layer that are sharp, make a mask to make sure that blends through, and stack it all together to that final layered image for us. So let's go grab that coffee that we had made earlier while it was making our layers and finish that up. Now if we look at the picture itself, we can see everything from the very beginning bud all the way through the last bud, along with every flower is now in focus. This is our final stacked image. If we come over to our layers, we can see that it has merged, and then each one of these layers, this is the mask, where it's sharp, where it's not, and what it's allowing to come through in each one of these layers. Now, this is exactly the way I would want this, so I'm going to go to save as a PSD file. That's going to make sure that each of those layers are retained, and that way when we go into Lightroom, if we want to work on this again, we can launch it back in as a PSD and still work with each of those layers. So I'm going to choose PSD, Photoshop file. We're going to let it go back into that same original folder so it lives with all those originals. I'm going to leave the same name on it, and it's automatically putting -edit here since we've merged these together, and we're going to go ahead and hit save. Now that it's done saving, we can come down to here and look at our shot and see that if I hit I for info, that's our PSD file, and we can see that it's fully in focus from the large bud up front here all the way through the one in back, and all of our flowers are in focus too. If we zoom in, we can really kind of see and look around and see just how sharp everything is within this image. Well, that's it. It's pretty easy to do, and for somebody that isn't really adept in Photoshop, it's one of the least daunting things to try in there since most of it's automated. We're going to be getting a little bit more into Photoshop over the next month, so make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss any of those episodes. I'm the Lightroom Whisperer. See you next time.